Thanks for checking out this video on the Meet Me in the Underworld eyeshadow palette by Lois Cosmetics. I'll share some info about the palette theme, how it looks, and share my swatches, and a few eye looks followed by my final thoughts. Before that, I'll quickly share some brand info. Lois Cosmetics is a UK indie brand based in my local city of London. It was founded in March 2020 by Lois, also known as Lois MUA, who's a professional makeup artist with years of industry experience and product developer of award-winning cosmetics. The brand's mission is to provide professional, high-quality cosmetics that are fun and functional. They're stated as cruelty-free and vegan. They're not yet certified with PETA or other independent sources. They have stated they will make more conscious choices about being more environmentally friendly by sourcing biodegradable and recyclable materials where possible, which is great. Meet Me in the Underworld is the third palette they've released, and probably the one that has the best design stamped by the brand. It's inspired by the tragic love story of Orpheus and Eurydice, one of the many popular ancient Greek myths. There are different versions of the story told. I'll share a version I know. Orpheus was a gifted musician who's mastered his skill with his voice and his lyre. It was said that his voice could charm anyone who heard it, that no god nor mortal living creature could resist his music. Orpheus encountered Eurydice one day at a gathering. She was said to be beautiful and enamored by Orpheus's voice, and so the pair fell in love. Orpheus and Eurydice married, but on their wedding day, she was bitten by a snake and died from the venom. Orpheus was struck with grief, and determined to bring her back to life, he descended into the dark underworld, asking the gods to restore her mortality, using his lyre as a weapon to play music they could not resist. Hades was the god of the underworld, who agreed to Eurydice's return, but warned Orpheus he must not look back at Eurydice while she was in the dark underworld, and must wait until she walks into the light of the mortal upper world. Orpheus gave thanks and made his way, not looking back while still in the dark. As soon as he stepped into the light of the living world, he turned around to hug his wife. Eurydice had not yet fully stepped into the light, so after his glimpse, she was drawn back into the underworld. Orpheus was devastated and tried to re-enter the underworld, but this time he was denied and the gates remained closed. Orpheus died, and there's different versions of how this happened, but there's also speculation that his death allowed him to be reunited with Eurydice. I think the palette really embraces this story. It even comes with a card so you can learn about it. The greenish artwork and colour story has lots of references to the myth. It's marked as made in China, and with this, the artwork, packaging and colour story arrangements were designed by the brand. So it's a very typical composition by a very small indie brand, which in this case I think is done really well. There's 16 shades with 2 grams of product each, which is pretty good. It's more than the usual standard, and the shelf life is marked as the standard 12 months once opened. Here's a close-up look of the shades. Poetry is described as a rose-pink shimmer, probably reflecting the numerous poems that have been written about Orpheus and Eurydice. The next shade is Lyre, which is a copper foil shimmer, referring to Orpheus's instrument and reflecting its wooden surface. The next shade is called Enchanted, described as a yellow-toned green shimmer, very much what Orpheus did to Hades with his music, to enter the underworld to seek Eurydice. Next to it is the shade Forest, which is described as a deep, cool-toned green shimmer, where Orpheus and Eurydice encountered each other. On the next row there's a shade dedicated to Eurydice, described as a soft peachy pink shimmer. The next shade is dedicated to Hades, the god of the underworld, which is a deep, cool-toned brown matte. The next shade is called Muses. Known as inspirational goddesses of literature, science and the arts, Orpheus's mother Calliope was a muse. And there's an alternate ending to the story, where the muses decided to keep Orpheus's head when he died, so that he could sing forever to the living people with his enchanting melodies. The shade is described as a foiled shimmer with a cool rose-toned taupe. The next shade is dedicated to Orpheus. This is also a foil metallic, described as a green tone antique gold. Onto the third row, the next shade is called Snakebite, referring to when Eurydice was bitten by the viper. It's described as a warm-toned pink matte. The next shade, Footsteps, referring to Eurydice following Orpheus through the underworld. It was said that Orpheus couldn't hear her footsteps, and one of the reasons he glanced back too soon. The next shade is called Nymph, which is a neutral moss green matte. In some versions, Eurydice was a wood nymph, and there's also versions told where she was dancing with the nymphs when she was bitten by a snake. The next shade is called Myth, which is a terracotta matte. This story is a Greek myth, often folklore and fables on the nature and origin of the world. On to the fourth and final row, the next shade is called Tragic Love, for it is a tragic love story, represented as a deep red-brown matte. The next shade is Melody, which is a warm-toned brown matte, referring to the enchanted music by Orpheus. The next shade is Woodland, where much of the story is told in the living world, and paints it well with a cool-toned khaki matte. And the final shade is Underworld, the kingdom of the dead in the dark shadows, a perfect tribute to a deep black matte. So that's how the palette and the shades look. Here are my swatches. No primer used. Those are my swatches. Here are a couple of looks I created, starting with the first look. That's the first look. Just try nature's green warm feel. Here's the second look I created. So that's the second look. For this I tried red, pinks and delicate colours to represent love and beauty. Here is the third look. third look. I tried something deeper to represent enchantment and the underworld. So those are the looks, here are my final thoughts. I wasn't drawn in as much by their previous palettes that were standard and therefore very similar to ones already on the market, but this palette stands out with a good stamp of the brand's design. The artwork, colour story and shade names reflect the myth and its characters perfectly. I think it's beautifully done. Delivery was good, and the way this palette was packaged and delivered had a really nice touch. It was covered in some pretty leaf decorations and includes a card that tells the Greek myth, so customers can read the story, which is really nice. In terms of the formula ingredients, it's not unique, it's a standard formula, but similar to the observation I made in my last review, the shadows feel a lot creamier than the ones in their previous palettes. So for me, the quality has really improved, and they have very good pigment to build and blend. Typical of these formulas, I find red takes just a little more effort to blend, but not much. There is a slight red stain, typical of vegan formulas. I don't find it an issue, it's usually not so noticeable, and it goes in a couple of hours on my skin. Oil-based cleansers do a good job too. In terms of wear, it can last around 7 hours or so with primer. With setting spray, they lasted between 9 and 10 hours. And that's with me having oily eyelids and kind of hooded monolid eyes. As an overall package, I would say this palette is great value. You've got 16 shades with 2 grams of product rather than 1. And with the full price of £28, that's £1.75 per 2 gram shade, not considering packaging or anything else. So I think that's a really good deal, especially for my fellow friends in the UK who are interested in and want to support local indie brands. And also it's a little bit closer for European friends as well. And for my international friends who are interested, they offer worldwide shipping. I get an inkling from the FAQ that the shipping's a bit pricier, but it does say it includes things like insurance and tracking, with customs as well, which is not included at checkout. That could be an additional cost for you. So check out their shipping info just in case. I recommend this especially if you're like me, you like greens and you like the grungy green colour story, and if you appreciate themed palettes like this. And especially if you're in the UK, this indie palette is really close to home. And considering the overall improvement in quality, it's really worth it. Lois Cosmetics have done an excellent job on this. And sometimes that can make you a victim of your own success. This palette sold out so quick, with the demand being overwhelming. But there will be restocks, and I highly recommend you join up to the mailing list so you hear about it first. Overall, I think this is their best palette yet. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. And if you have a favourite story, share it below. As always, thanks for watching.